Charlotte with Share with Charlotte podcast, where emphasis is placed on finding balance in relationship. And I am the creator and host. And I want to welcome you again to another new episode. And that is, have your voice been muted? Have your voice been muted? And I chose this particular one because I want to share with you some things really about myself and some things that I experienced. And maybe you can relate to this for people that have experienced this as I did, or just tips and tools that in life, if you find yourself in this position, that maybe you'll rethink it. But it's have your voice been muted? And I'm going to take you back to the 80s because that's when I first married. And I was married to my first husband. And I was green as grass. And I do mean green as grass. I was in my early 20s when I married. And I didn't really understand because at that particular time, I had never, and I do mean never, seen a relationship that was healthy. I didn't know what that looked like or even what my role was as to really being the wife of, or even my position, my rights, what I was entitled to, that kind of thing. I really didn't know enough. And if you ever looked at my previous episode of Peeling Away the Pain, part one, part two, or even the very beginning, which is my first one I did, it speaks a lot of my childhood. So let me share a little bit about that before I share more about where I was in that particular marriage. When I was a child and growing up, I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a right to speak. I didn't have a right, even when there was injustice or things that were done that I knew shouldn't have been, and I was within the rights. But even if I was accused of something, I had no voice to even explain it away or even have any voice at all to even speak. You just took the punishment. I just took the punishment. And so I carried that into my marriage. And you got to understand too that I left home when I was 18. So my mother was very dominant. And so I was still in that place of you just don't speak or talk back, or that was considered talking back. And then I went off to college, which I graduated within 3.5 years. I was done. I got a degree in psychology and one in social work. But I'm now back at home from January to May, back with my mom. And then I moved out. I was on my own. But I moved out in May, but when I graduated in December, but I met my husband in March. So that only gave me 3 months away from school. And we married within 2 years from the time that we met. And so I really didn't have much time to really learn myself, grow within myself, and just know really who I was and to strengthen me as to and define me. And so when I married my husband at the time, we married in March. And even though if you've gone back in my previous episodes on Feel Away the Pain in the beginning, I was the parent really to my siblings. And so I've always been a mother. But when I married, there was so much pressure for me. We married in March, but he went in with so much pressure. My husband did at the time. Went in with so much pressure to, I want a family. I want a family. But I've been raising kids all my life until I went away to college. And so I really wasn't ready to be a mother yet. Not that I didn't want to be a mother, because I did, but I immediately was pressured to become a mother. And so what I end up doing, because I didn't reject that, keep in mind, have your voice been muted? Because I didn't really have in myself a voice. So I went along with it. So I was off, I was on birth control pills. I got off in May. Well, I was pregnant by August. And we had our first child the following June. And I became a mother. And so, but this was really where I was throughout this whole marriage. I found myself again being that child My husband was very dominant. Keep in mind, I'm green. I'm very green. I haven't explored more of the world. I went to a small. Remember, I was raised in small country town, East Texas, the Piney Woods of East Texas. Then I moved to Dallas right before my 14th birthday, and I'm now, of course, I see the world in a different light because I moved to the projects, the government housing. So I saw a lot of things within the world, but I was still treated from my mother from the spirit dominant view of you just do it. If I say do it, you just do it. You don't have a voice. You just do it. And so when I found myself in the marriage, I found myself with that same mentality because my husband was a very dominant individual. Not that he abused me in a sense of what people consider abuse, whether physical abuse or whether he, spoke with me, put me down, anguish words, or degraded me, those kind of things. No, it wasn't that. But I found myself not speaking out. Again, the thoughts that I had, I held in. I didn't feel like I had a right to dispute things that I didn't like. And I just went along. All the things that he was doing, because he was self-employed, he was an entrepreneur. I supported him, was all in 100%. Whatever he wanted to do, I was there 100%. But on the flip side, the things I wanted to do, he didn't support me. I wanted to go back to school and get my master's. He said no. I wanted to start a business with a friend of mine, a daycare. He said no. But I didn't really speak out. I didn't really share my true feelings, my thoughts, or to where I felt like maybe my voice could have been heard. I shut down. I just went along. If he said no, it was just no. And I'm not saying if I was so persistent about doing something, I'm not going to say that he might would have understood my feelings and how I was really adamant about going back to school, adamant about starting a business, which I wanted to do that. But what I did was I didn't really voice how I really, really felt. Because again, I was that little child again under my mother. And I felt again, that's really where I was. I don't know where you are in your relationships. And I'm not just speaking if you're just in a marriage or you with a partner that you find yourself that you can identify with what I'm speaking of. It could be even with your family. It could even be on your workforce where there's some things you want to say. There's some things that you really need to say. There's some things that yet you're holding back that's worthy of being heard, but you don't say it out of fear or intimidation. So you don't say it at all. So you just go along to get along. When really what you have to say may be significant. And really what you say may hold value, but you don't say it because you just don't think that maybe you have a right to say it or it's the repercussions if you say it. So therefore, you remain silent. So have your voice been muted? Have your voice been muted to where you're holding back on things you want to say? Or you're in a relationship that you just go along to get along because it's the easiest thing to do? So have your voice been muted? And I'm saying if your voice been muted, and if your voice is being muted, it's really by choice. He didn't take that away from me. And I want to make sure you understand that. He did not take that away from me in my marriage. I surrendered to it. I did that to myself because of he reminded me of my place I was when I was a child under my mother. But I'm an adult when I married him. I'm a grown woman who easily could have spoken out if I felt I had the right to do it. Or if I felt like I didn't have the fear in me that I was literally intimidated by speaking out. So it's not like he took it. I just surrendered to it within myself and became this submissive woman that really felt like she had no voice because my voice didn't matter. My duty is to just go along with whatever it is, because really for me, it was the easiest thing to do, because therefore I'm not challenging you on what you say. So I'm just going along with it because that's why I grew up in my childhood, to not challenge, but just to go along because it's what I'm supposed to do. But let me just tell you, who may find yourself in that position, it's not good. It's not healthy. It's not something that you should feel like you don't have a right to do or to say or to be. Because in those relationships, you've grown. You're an adult. You're in your own life and you control your life. The choices you make are your own. Yes, you consider your partner. Yes, you consider your spouse. Yes, you consider your children. Yes, you consider your family, but ultimately, your choice that you make is your own. Because you make those choices, you have free will to make your own choices. But your voice is critical. That if you find that you have something to say, you should definitely be in a position where you feel you have a right to say it. And as they say, you choose your battles. Yes, you choose your battle. Everything is not about speaking out, but those things that you know you hold true to your heart, that you know you're going to be affected by it. Because if you stack those things up, they stacked up to a pile of a level of just all those times you were silent. You just stacking it up, and then you become resentful. You not only resent the person or the situation, you start resenting yourself because you didn't speak out. Those were hard times for me emotionally because I had just given up on speaking out for me, knowing I too have a voice, I too have rights, I too am valued in this relationship. It's not a one-sided, and all the value goes to one side. I too am valued, but I didn't see that. I was the wife, I was the mother, I was in my career, but I spoke out on my job. I spoke out when it came to the children, but I would not speak out when it came to the rights within the marriage because I really didn't know how to do that, to rip through those fears I had, to rip through that intimidation that I carried, to tear away from my childhood experiences where I didn't have the right to do that, to shed that away, even though I had shedded the pain, but the scars were still there. The blemish was still there. The stain was still there. And I carry that because I didn't take the time to also grow within myself so that I would actually know me, to value me, which would have strengthened me, empowered me. I didn't allow myself the time to do that. I left school 3.5 years till I graduated. Met my husband again 3 months later, married within the 2 years, and jumped right back into something that reminded me of when I was a child under my mother's influence, under my mother's power. It just reminded me of that. And that I had to really understand what that was. And I'm just, what amazes me is I didn't really understand that whole dynamics of where I was in that relationship. And this is the truth. Until this year, I married in my early 20s, and I was 66 years old when I came to terms with what that really was and who I really was in that relationship. I didn't know that that's who I really was. I knew the things I didn't like about the relationship. I knew the things I didn't like about myself in the relationship, but I never connected that with my mother when I was a child until years later when I was 66. And I was just blown away. I mean, blown away that I've carried that all that time without understanding. And so I want you, if you're in this type of relationship, if you find yourself where where your voice has been muted and you've allowed your voice to be muted, how did you get there? How did you become this person? How did you find yourself that you didn't have a voice? Because it comes from a root of somewhere. You didn't just become that person. There's a root to it. I know my root. Do you know your root? As to where you became that person. But all of this is finding balance. I had no balance. I had no balance in that relationship because I was so out of balance in myself. I can't put that just on him. I have to put that also on me because I chose that to be that person. Because he didn't hold a gun to me, he didn't threaten me. There was enough fear in me on my own to be and become that person in that relationship. That marriage lasted 6 years. 6 years. And when it was over in 6 years, there was really a sign of relief within me because that's when I really started to grow, to learn who I was, to find me, to understand me, to value me. I found myself, I found my voice. I found that I was important. I found that I had to say was important. It's not because I didn't feel like I was smart enough. I wasn't intelligent enough. It's just that it was never heard. It was never heard. I believed in me, but I didn't believe enough that he would believe in me. So I just followed. And I've never been a follower. I grew up groomed to be a leader. All I know is leadership. I've been raising kids since I was in elementary school to be independent. And because my mother put all that responsibility on me to be this way and to manage this way. But when I married, I became that child again. Because if you go back again, listen to my podcast, my episodes, Peeling Away the Pain, part 1 and 2, beginning, where it breaks down my childhood. And you might, if you haven't listened to it, and if you find yourself experiencing some of this, I encourage you to listen to it because you may find yourself in it. Because again, there is a root. If you find yourself where your voice has been muted, there is a root. But you have to understand where's the root so you can understand why you got there, why you there. And then you have to develop change within yourself. Take that step to speak up and speak out. You have a voice to be heard. You are valued. You are worthy to be heard because you matter. And even if you don't matter to nobody else, but you have to matter to yourself, that you are important and not just go along to just get along on everything and feel that you don't have a right to be heard, because you do matter. You do have a voice. I want to encourage you. If I'm speaking to you and you can relate to this, or maybe it's where you've been, but you came out like I did, where you now have been able to just spread your wings and fly. You've been groomed to grow. And I think that's when I really came to the realization of my worthiness, is when that relationship ended. And I really, truly saw myself and I became empowered within myself. And once you go there, you don't go back. And I didn't go back to that person. I would never go back to that person ever, ever, ever again. Because this person I learned to love. It's all part of loving yourself, which is the last episode. It's how you love yourself. I learned to love myself. And to love myself is all part of being heard, being valued, first to yourself, that I matter. If to no one, I matter to me. So therefore, my voice matters. I matter. And so I just want to encourage you to just be open to taking that first leap, that first step, even if it's a baby step. Just do something. Silence, being muted is never the right response. If this is all you do, because you have to matter first to you. You have to matter first to yourself. Now, my husband and I, that husband, which is the father of my 3 children, we remarried after 29 years, but I'm going to be doing an episode on that. So I won't go all into that. But I will say this, and that is when we remarried, before we remarried, I made clear he understood that I am not that same woman, that same wife you married the first time. I am confident within myself. I love myself. I speak up and I speak out because I have a voice. I matter. And you're not getting that woman or that wife. So if you understand that and you can accept that, then you already know what you're getting going into the marriage. But that woman would never, ever, ever be rebirthed. Ever. She's gone. She's buried. I've laid her to rest. She will not be resurrected. Not her. Because I've learned to love me. And I want you to learn to love you by having a voice, that your voice is not muted, which, believe me, is not because it was taken from you. It's because you gave it up and you surrendered to it, to yourself. You muted your voice. You chose that. It's a choice. It's a choice. And you have a right. This isn't about, I'm a woman, you're a man. It can be anybody. But you have a right, wherever you are, to speak up and speak out. Because some things you have to say. Not everything. But some things you have a need. You have a responsibility. And you have the right to say it. And there is a need to say it. We have our wants. Because we don't have to address everything, but sometimes there's a need for you to address whatever that is, to be said and to be heard and to be acknowledged. You have that. But as always, I'm always looking for other opportunities in terms of information I can share with you beyond just what I feel like God has compelled me to say. And I did a little research, because I'm always trying to do a little bit to give you something more than just me. but I did a little research, and then I want to just share this with you quick. I read some information on a gentleman. His name is Victor Hugo. He's a renowned French author, poet, and playwright. But he had some really profound information that I thought was so relevant to what my podcast is about. And that he said that he emphasized speaking out, emphasized power, a matter of how you communicate and one of expression. And not being heard, even the idea that you won't being heard is no reason for silence. Don't use that as an excuse or your reason to keep silent because you think you won't be being heard or you won't be heard. That is not an excuse. Then he goes on to talk about finding your voice. He says silence is not the appropriate response when you feel like you have a need to say something. It's never the appropriate response, never. Instead, he urges individuals to find their voice and actively communicate your thoughts, your opinion, and your emotions. Share how you feel. I mean, if you feel a certain way, how are people going to know how you feel if you don't share it? People going to know your thoughts if you never say it, you never express it. How people going to know your opinion about anything if you mute your voice within you? Don't do that. And then he says, by not muting your voice, it creates opportunity for a dialogue, to share in a conversation, for understanding and connecting. And you can't put that on someone like that we just don't connect because are you really sharing your voice? Are you really sharing your thoughts and your opinion about things? And your voice, he says, hold power to bring about change. And you know why nothing changed in my marriage? Because I didn't have the voice. I didn't give myself the voice to even bring about change. So who am I to complain that I didn't get the things I needed when I alone chose not to have a voice? I alone chose that, to not to have a voice. So how can it bring about change when I never did demand change? I can't put that on him. Breaking free from oppression, where you feel like you're in some dictatorship, where you feel like you've been it's a dominant relationship. Because that's really the way I felt. You were just doing you and I just go along with you. But I put that on me more than he put that on me. I did that to me. But that's really the way I felt. Your voice is a message of empowerment. I didn't feel like I was empowered. I really did not feel it. That silence can be a form of oppression. Yes, I was oppressed. And breaking free from it is essential for personal growth and societal progress. Breaking free from it is essential personal growth. And like I said before, when I literally broke away from it is when I divorced. And that's when I grew. I was able to grow within me, personal growth. Because if you in a state of oppression, you don't grow. You stagnate. You are stuck. You're in a one place. You don't grow. I was only able to grow once I left that relationship. And I found myself where I learned to truly love myself. And then it says too, silence can stem from fear and insecurity. Well, for that, absolutely. Because if I grew up the way I did, which I did with my mother, there was a sense of fear to even speak out because I was never allowed. I was always punished for it, if that's the case. You didn't freely speak, or you were speaking against the authority of my mother. And again, that I was on the authority of my husband. So therefore, there was that intimidation and fear within me and that insecurity within myself that I had no right to do it, to speak or voice. And you may not only grow personally, but now you are a contributor. That's what a voice does. It helps you grow within yourself, and it also now allows you to contribute to whatever it is that's going on around you. You're now a contributor. Well, you know what? I was never a contributor. Only contribution that I made was just following his lead. That was my contribution. But for me, I was stagnated. I never did get that master's degree. Never did. Tried 2 or 3 times afterwards, but never fulfilled the completion of it. I didn't do it. Wish I had, but I didn't do it. Because I didn't speak out. My voice wasn't heard. How important it was that I get my master's. And what Victor Hugo concludes is this. And that is not being heard is, again, there's no reason for silence. And it says it serves as a poignant, which means sad or touching or pitiful reminder of the power of communication, self-expression, and empowerment. I didn't have no self-expression because I didn't speak out. I didn't express myself. And I sure wasn't empowered. It urges us to find our voice. This is what he does. It urges us to find our voice, break free from oppression, and overcome fear and insecurity. He just summed it up. That's all he did. And now, once you have that voice, all he says is every voice is valued and heard, but it'll never be valued or heard if it's kept within you. But every voice is valued and should be heard. But that's on you. I shared you my story, my testimony, and I just don't believe that I'm the only person who's been through it. I don't believe I'm the only person who have experienced it, or I tend to believe that somebody maybe listening is even experiencing it now. Whether it be your relationship with your spouse, partner, your family, your workforce, out in the world, wherever, because your voice is your voice and you carry it wherever you go. But I want to leave you again with the fact you have a right and a need to be heard, because that brings value to yourself. And to love yourself is to value yourself. And again, this podcast, have your voice been muted? And that's my question to you. Have your voice been muted? And if you one that is speaking out, then praises to you, because it's all part of loving you. So I thank you for tuning in to this episode, one with Share with Charlotte, where emphasis is placed on finding balance in relationships. And I also want to encourage you that if you have a testimony, you have a story, you have something that you want to share that you know can be beneficial and something that someone can learn from, grow from. God never give you your story, your trials, your testimony for just you. He give them because they're also to be a blessing to someone else. And I know my stories, which I have many, are not just my own, but they also belongs to you. So I hope this particular episode has been one that you find insightful, meaningful, encouraging, one that you can take for good food and good feeding, that you can, as a takeaway, that it can help you, encourage you, strengthen you. That if you find yourself in that position and you are one of those people, I broke free. You don't have to necessarily leave your spouse or your situation to break free, because you can still find it by taking that baby step, by speaking out on something, anything that you find real value in, that you need to be heard, that you need to say something, then you should say something. Thank you again for tuning in. My website is www.sharewithcharlotte.com. And I thank you again for visiting. You can go to YouTube. Please press follow, subscribe, share it. Share this with someone you think that can benefit from the message. But I do thank you, and I look forward to the next episode where we reconnect. And thank you again for tuning in. See you at the next one. Thank you.